Is as on the order paper. Ronnie Cowan.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, for taking me so early on in this debate. We are today debating the Post Office management culture, but I very briefly want to touch on the responsibility that Fujitsu have too, because as I understand the facts, they too are culpable and should be part of any agreed outcome. Fujitsu have a role to play in bringing this sorry tale to a speedy end. Every computer system in the world has the potential to contain bugs. People write the code. Errors happen. The vast majority are tiny. What matters is how those responsible react once an error has been identified. I worked in IT for 35 years, most of which was developing and implementing computer solutions for business problems. We reviewed code, we pored over it, we took pride in doing it, and somebody somewhere at some point was looking at this Horizon system at this particular problem. Why were they looking at that problem? Who directed them to it, and when were they asked to address it? I have, and I don't want to stereotype my fellow software developers, I have a vision in my head of somebody with a brain load of code one morning looking at this problem, and something struck them. They took off their headphones, they put down their 5th cup of coffee of the day and said, "We have got a problem here." Because this is important. In any system worth its salt, the modification to fix that problem will have been documented, and somebody within Fujitsu can say when it was identified, and therefore at what point did they inform the Post Office. And that matters, because when we then know that the Post Office stopped acting out of ignorance and belligerence and started lying to people. Today we have a government which has been in denial. It's as if this isn't a problem of their making, but please correct me if I am wrong. The Post Office is a limited company owned entirely by the UK government. The Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy has a responsibility for postal affairs. The Office of Communications, Ofcom, is the regulator of postal services. Ofcom is a public corporation accountable to Parliament. Can anyone imagine what it's like to be an individual wrongly accused of a crime, humiliated and ridiculed, forced into bankruptcy, and knowing that you are innocent for all these years, while the wider establishment stood back and did nothing? The Post Office proudly boasts, "At our core, we are a business driven and defined by our social purpose." Well, here's a chance to prove that, and they've failed. Despite the contrition, despite the promises to learn from their mistakes, despite admitting that they got it wrong, despite acknowledging that compensation must be paid, what do we see today? Is the establishment hiding behind very expensive lawyers that I can only presume the taxpayer is paying for. Fortunately, in my life, I rarely bump up against the legal profession in their professional capacity. It's usually been restricted to house moves, and that's confusing enough. The mountains of administration and the perpetual legal speak leave most people gasping for air. What must it be like to be faced by a criminal prosecution that you're innocent of, and now that your innocence is proven, that same force has been utilised to slow down the process that should be working for you to receive compensation? The letter by Professor Chris Hodges, Chair of the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board, which was written to Nick Reid, CEO of the Post Office, and quoted by the Honourable Member for Motherwell and Wishaw, perfectly encapsulates the current situation. And I won't repeat the entire letter, but I would like to repeat a couple of lines. Your reliance of legal argument and legal terminology similarly does not impress us. We do not perceive demonstration of behaviour as anything like a sympathetic understanding towards the people your organisation has harmed. I am not for a minute saying that the Post Office do not require legal representation. They certainly do. I am saying the manner in which they engage with the victims of the Horizon scandal is a measure of their concern, contrition and compassion, and they have failed on all three fronts. Crucial, because a successful resolution depends on the mindset of the Post Office management changing. We continually see the citizens of the UK being chewed up by large corporate and government entities. The case of Equitable Life, the Waspy Woman, the bloodborne virus scandal and the Post Office Horizon fiasco are just a few. If the citizens of the UK are to have faith in their politicians, then we need to get it right and be on their side, and when big corporations are beating down on them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. I would like to get on the record and see what he thinks of being in the original Post Office Review Group. By 2015, there had been a whistleblower from Fujitsu who'd come forward from the boiler room, as they called it. He'd been altering accounts without the knowledge of the sub-postmasters. The MPs of the review group knew. The investigator at Second Sight knew, Ron Warmington. The Post Office knew that the convictions were unsafe, and the government knew. Yet it was another 5 years of very expensive litigation against the 555 before justice was seen to be done.
I think it's an ongoing example of how, historically, the government of the day thought they could weather this storm and get away with it. And what I'm saying today is that the UK government has to be part of the solution. To be part of the problem, to continue to be part of the problem, is unacceptable. And finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, the UK government must act swiftly to ensure that all innocent victims have their convictions quashed and that the correct and acceptable compensation is paid. Anything else is an extension of the ongoing miscarriage of justice that innocent men and women have been subjected to because of the hubris of the Post Office and the UK governments past and present.